Okay, hello, everyone. Nice to have you here. And they said it couldn't be done. We, after 3 semesters of wide-ranging discussions, we are at the very end of our investigation into USD's founding principles, beauty, goodness, and truth. And the hope expressed at the very first session, way back in February of 2018, was that a set of ideas could be recovered from the dangers of easy sloganeering and revealed in their, I hate sloganeering. I want one of these things to be revealed in their complexity and in their essentially contested nature. And this, I believe, has been done, and it's been done as a result of the expertise of our wonderful faculty in the College of Arts and Sciences. And it's been, speaking purely personally, it's been a joy for me to listen every week to the thoughts and reflections of our colleagues. It's been an enormous revelation indeed. Many of the people are here who contributed so beautifully to this series. We live in a very mercenary age, and yet it's a mark of the generosity of spirit of each and every one of the contributors that they were willing to do all of this for nothing more than the Humanities Centre mug. I do, yeah, it is. It is. This is an exclusive item. It's the Iron Throne of Alcala Park. While I have this in my hand, in fact, I'd also like to thank 2 people who attended each and every one of these sessions, Larry and Phil. And I've got for you your own... And your coffee in the morning will never taste better than it does out of that. And while we're on the subject of refreshments, I do hope you'll all stay. We have a really beautifully planned reception. Thanks to Lindy for this and for much else. Lindy's support of the structure of this is wonderful. So thank you. So this very last session is going to consist of closing reflections on the series, and I couldn't be happier with the lineup we have for this. To introduce them in alphabetical order, they're all familiar to you, but they deserve a big welcome. Dr. Noel Norton completed her BA at UCLA before undertaking graduate work and earning her PhD from UC Santa Barbara. She joined the USD faculty in 1994, is Professor of Political Science and International Relations, and has been, since 2014, Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences. Dean Norton's research focuses on issues in gender, power, and governance. Among her many publications is the book Creating Gender, The Sexual Politics of Welfare Policy, published by Lynn Reiner Press in 2007. Dr. Norton, it has to be said, is an inspirational fighter for the arts and humanities at USD, and she is owed an enormous debt of gratitude from all of us who care about these things that really matter. Without Dean Norton, the Humanities Centre wouldn't exist. So first of all, thank you. Sister Virginia Rodee is a member of the Society of the Sacred Heart. She earned her bachelor's degree here at USD in 1957 and a Master of Arts in English in 1974. Sister Rodee spent 22 years in Korea teaching at the Sacred Heart College for Women, now known as the Catholic University of Korea. She subsequently worked for 6 years in Rome, training religious of the Sacred Heart from 23 countries around the world. Returning to USD, she became Assistant Vice President for Mission and Ministry, a position from which she has recently retired. In 2007, she was honored as a Coronado Legend for her contribution to women's education. She is an absolutely treasured member of the USD community, and it was a joy for for us to hear her at our very first session in February 2018. So it's completely appropriate that she should be back to close things down for us. So wonderful to have Sister Virginia with us. And finally, Dr. Mike Williams also gained his BA from USD. After his first degree here, he earned a JD from the Washington College of Law at American University and a PhD from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He returned to USD in 1999, joining the faculty of the Department of Political Science and International Relations, where he now holds the position of professor. Dr. Williams's research focuses on politics in sub-Saharan Africa and principally in South Africa, with special interests in democratization, indigenous political structures, local governance, rule of law, the courts and constitutionalism. He is the author of a number of things, but including the book Chieftaincy, the State and Democracy, Political Legitimacy in Post-Apartheid South Africa, published by Indiana University Press in 2010. If that weren't enough, Dr. Williams is also director of USD's Changemaker Hub. Mike Williams. So what a delight it is to have all three of you here to lead our final conversation on beauty, goodness and truth. Please join me once more in giving a warm welcome to our three guests today.
Well, good afternoon. It's so happy to be back here again for this. Beauty, goodness, and truth is our focus, and I'd like to look at that as the founding vision of USD. And thank you, Lindy, for getting the PowerPoint for me. Also, I'd like to thank Dr. Brian Clark, for this whole series. It's really been amazing for 3 semesters that we've been able to have these lectures, and I attended as many as I could, and my understanding was greatly enhanced by listening to others and what they thought about beauty, goodness, and truth. It was Mother Rosalie Clifton Hill, founder of the San Diego College for Women, who first used that expression that is so familiar to us, beauty, goodness, and truth. She was the co-founder with Bishop Buddy of the university as we know it today, and she founded what was then called the San Diego College for Women, and he founded what was called the San Diego College for Men and the School of Law. What is not so well known is what shaped her as an educator and how she understood that educational philosophy. So I'll talk a little bit about Mother Hill and then move into our topic for today. She was born in 1878 in Washington, D.C., in a family whose 17th century forebears left England searching for religious liberty, and they settled in the Free State of Maryland. According to the family tradition, when George Washington was looking for property for the Capitol, he found 4 donors. 2 of them were Notley Young and Daniel Carroll, a great-granduncle and a great-uncle of Rosalie Hill. And among her ancestors was also Archbishop Carroll, the first native-born prelate in the United States, and Charles Carroll, who was a signer of the Declaration of Independence. Another relative, Robert Livingston, negotiated the Louisiana Purchase. So, but that's all her background. It was really her maternal grandmother who got her interested in her path as a builder. When visiting, she used to teach Rosalie about drawing or sketching houses, institutions, and also using quadrille paper to make rooms or whatever. So she, as a child, even did that. And later in her life, she used those exercises in renovating houses of the society, new buildings and schools. And I believe that in the university archives here, we have the sketches that she did of Founders Hall and Camino Hall, sketches that she turned over to the architect, Frank Hope, later. And maybe our Renaissance Building Committee would be interested in looking at what happened in the beginning. But anyway, they're there. As you know, she took a long time and was very deliberate about choosing the site of the university. And she made a real decision about the style of the architecture, the Spanish Renaissance, which is really an adaptation of Spanish Renaissance, because she wanted it to reflect the early history of California. Her education didn't follow traditional lines, though. She was educated at private schools in Washington and the Washington area, and then when she was 18, went to Canada, to Montreal, to the Sault-Recollet, a suburb of Montreal, which would have been like superior classes, as they called it in those days. Not, well, it'd be comparable to college, I would guess. They had an advanced study for 2 years, a very rigorous plan of studies, including philosophy, theology, history, the arts, science, languages, and whatever. And that may have been the place where she got her love of philosophy, because in all of the universities that she were under her jurisdiction, philosophy was an automatic minor. So she worked on the philosophy for sure. She entered the Sacred Heart, the Society of the Sacred Heart, in 1899 in New York. And after her religious training, taught in many schools, mostly on the eastern seaboard. And then finally made her profession in France, final profession in the society in 1907. She was recognized as a leader, an educational leader, at a very young age, and was given responsibilities as head of schools in many places. And in my reading, I found that what they remarked about her was her wisdom and her sensitive understanding of people. So she was very successful as a leader. And she then became superior of many convents and schools and began her building experiences then. She always worked closely with the architect and was very precise about the research of the stylistic details, that she was very interested in the detail. In her relationships, they say, she exhibited wisdom, charity, and a deep personal holiness. Well, we'll see. She was named vicar in 1929, vicar of the West, as we said, west of United States, which meant Chicago to the West Coast, so Chicago to California. And in that jurisdiction, she had 4 colleges, and she held that position from 1929 to 1961. That wouldn't happen today. Too long and too much. But in her case, it wasn't. But significantly, the colleges, Barra College in Chicago, Omaha had Duchesne College, San Francisco, the San Francisco College for Women, and then San Diego. So she had 4 colleges. And to consider what it must have been to prepare faculties was considerable. I mean, she was very intent that all would have their higher degrees. And so we were cloistered at that time, enclosed, but she got permission to send them to secular institutions, Berkeley, Stanford, University of Chicago, University of Catholic of America and Washington, and many, many others. So it was very, very important to her that they would be very well prepared, and that was unusual at that time. She built the San Francisco College for Women, very different from our campus here, a Gothic structure, but similar in the sense that it had a great view. It had the whole of the San Francisco Bay and the Golden Gate and whatever. But if you notice the steps, there were a lot of steps to climb to get to it, so hard. And this is just something off the web. But that was a very fine institution in San Francisco. And then in San Diego, which followed, the San Diego College for Women, she had much experience as a builder and a leader. And Bishop Buddy, who was the co-founder, recognized that. So he invited her in 1938 it was, to collaborate with him in the founding of the university. And she readily accepted, but it wasn't until 1946 that she could come to San Diego after the war because of the construction materials were unavailable and whatever. So in 1946, she took up residence down in Old Town, where she began working with her quadrilles and sketching and getting ready for the university. There she is on the left there. She always had round, small glasses. But significantly, those are two from the very first class, which began in 1952 and graduated in 56. There were graduates before that, but they had transferred in. This class went all the way through. One is Elaine Longenue, and the other is Paula Sabin, whose father composed the words for the school song. So anyway, I don't know how she got in that picture, but this is a very short sketch of her life, but it was very clear that she came from a family or a background that was very prominently in the history of the United States, and at an early age showed great talent for building and education. Her education, I think, shaped her for her leadership. In fact, when she went to Montreal, she was so independent, she hated the place. But finally, after 2 years or so, I guess her spirit was somewhat tamed. But she had her own mind, that's for sure. I knew her in the last part of her life, from 1953 to 1964. She passed away here at the College for Women in 1964. And I had the opportunity of meeting with her several times as a student. She welcomed speaking to students. And although I knew she was a great woman, I didn't know how much she had risked for those 4 colleges that she had, and what an impact she had as an educator. But what marked her physically, she was short in stature, and she had very sharp blue eyes, very penetrating blue eyes. And when she engaged in conversation with you, she was very intent in listening and very respectfully asking questions and what you wanted to do and why you wanted to do it and how you were living your life and what did you aspire to. So she didn't waste time. She got to the serious questions very quickly. But having spoken a little bit about her, which we don't really talk about her here at the university very much, I would like to delve into a little bit what she offered in the philosophy of education, which has been really foundational at USD. And we know the phrase, beauty will attract them, goodness will lead them, and the truth will hold them. Very simply, what she meant by this is that beauty would be the initial attraction, not only for students, but faculty, staff, friends, visitors, whomever, that they would be first captivated and drawn by the beauty. And I would say this is still true today, certainly of USD. Whether it's the venue or the architecture or the landscaping, it draws people immediately to the beauty. But a little aside, she was criticized for founding or using the Spanish Renaissance architecture. They said, why don't you do something modern? Why are we in, Spanish Renaissance? She said, well, the modern will be outdated in 30 years. But Spanish Renaissance has been around for 200, and I think it's going for another 200. So she was insistent upon the Spanish Renaissance. With regard to beauty, though, Mother Hill strongly believed in the power of beauty to attract the mind and heart to God. She believed God was the source, or the ultimate source, of all of that beauty. And for this reason, she said, the solemn duty of an educator is to work with the Creator in developing all the powers of the human mind and heart. So she attributed that beauty. She didn't take it for herself, but attributed it to that God was the source of that beauty. And there are two quotations of hers here. One, where she points out in all ages, the church, which was so familiar to her, had treasures of beauty in the catacombs and the beautiful altars and the arches and the beautiful symbols and whatever. And down through the ages, art has been a focus in architecture, sculpture, painting, stained glass windows. I'm reminded of Notre Dame Cathedral now after the fire there. But she was very cognizant of that and very aware of that. And this is so evident at USD with the beautiful rounded arches, the decorative lacework over the doors, and the finials, the grill work. There's so much to take in, especially, I would say, in Founders Chapel and in Shiley Theater. It wasn't called Shiley, it was called The Theater. And in the library, it was simply the library, not Copley Library. And it was what the students now refer to as the Harry Potter room. That was the room. But she warned against superficiality and a lack of seriousness. She said, "We must remember that material beauty begins with an appeal to the senses, but must end with an appeal to the spirit, or else be untrue to lead the soul to God, the all-beautiful." So essential in her idea of beauty was the spirit. And well, I do the same. I go around and I see what's beautiful and I remark that, but don't go further. And that was very consistent. Goodness is a second part of that. Goodness will lead them. And people say, well, what do you mean by goodness? It's hard to say what would be included in that. But she took that beauty to a step further, that goodness with its power to lead. And what I think she meant by that is a certain power or dynamism that would prompt or involve this educational search to look for goodness. And goodness might be translated in many ways. Dedication or commitment, integrity, wisdom, knowledge, understanding, whatever revealed the more. And I think all of us, I feel very much that that's alive at USD. I think that's very strong and true today. Such is embodied in a person, in an educator. It's the faculty and staff who exhibit that goodness through their words or action, or their person. Sometimes it's not by saying anything. In her mind, it wasn't just the faculty where this goodness was found, but in all employees, no matter what their role was at the university. And lastly, the pursuit of truth. We know pursuit of truth, or we most accept it as a primary purpose of the university. And importantly, both beauty and goodness would lead to the truth. They went together. And she said that would hold them, that truth would hold them. I have stopped many times over what did she mean by hold them. I don't know in interpreting it, but maybe it was for her something of being rooted in the profound essence of life. That was how she lived, and that's how she wanted others to discover life. Not fixed and not locked in, changing and seeking, learning, developing, but rooted very strongly. And she considered that pursuit of truth a very primary purpose of the university. And I put some words there of Sister Sally Fury. I came across these. Many of you remember and know her. She said, her words were, Mother Hill recognized that a university needed to be academically demanding and populated by seekers of the truth wherever the truth led. And I love that open quality, wherever the truth led, and certainly she believed that. So for her, that was the raison d'etre, or the principal structure of the university. For some conclusions, I don't know, there are probably many others, but one that I think is important for Mother Hill. For her, beauty possessed something of a spiritual nature. And whatever you entitle spiritual, wherever it leads you, it's a depth. God was at the heart of beauty for her. But whether we use the word God or supreme being or whatever, the ultimate is what she intended. It was the ultimate expression of beauty and the source of beauty for her. Beauty and goodness are interrelated and can be seen as a composite. They're contingent upon one another. They are progressive, broadening in scope in each of these three elements. It is possible to focus on one and not go to the other, but not for her. The first two, beauty and goodness, were important for reaching the truth. And she intended them to assist one to reach the truth. So I think they need to be regarded as a whole. Can't just take parts, that it's a whole. And thirdly, beauty has an active expression. These elements are more philosophical, beauty, goodness, and truth. But Mother Hill, I think, had an active expression, which I think is very significant about her and how she regarded this philosophy. And this is based on what for Mother Hill was the very core of her life, which comes from the end and mission of the Society of the Sacred Heart. The end of the society is to discover the love of God. So that's a contemplative, it's a more inner discovery of the love of God. And its mission is to reveal that love. And revealing God's love, one of the primary ways of revealing God's love as a member of the society is through education. And she took that very seriously. This doesn't mean talking about God or proselytizing or whatever, but living one's life in such a way that it reveals and communicates God's love to others. And that was the essence for her. As I said, discover is something, implies something interior or contemplative, but reveal, I think, implies something active and exterior. And she believed that education was a means to express God's love through a lifetime of service. And that really is in essence what that small beauty, goodness, and truth, how it led her. And to conclude here, beauty, goodness, and truth. Beauty will attract them, goodness will lead them, and the truth will hold them. It is true that this is very concise, very simple in some ways, but it certainly contributed greatly in the founding vision of USD. And I believe it is still very foundational to the university and operative in many, many ways. So thank you, and I hope we have time for questions after.
Well, Mike and I just turned to each other. Well, I turned to Mike and said, we could really just all go home now. So that was gorgeous. Really, I think I try to say what you say, just a lot longer, so bear with me. No. Anyway, on February 6th, Brian said February 2018, but I know it was February 6th, 2018, 16 months ago, Dr. Clack began what he described as an ambitious exploration of the three underlying concepts that constituted the foundation of USD. And here they are again. I think Sister Rodee highlighted them quite well. Beauty will attract them, goodness will lead them, but the truth will hold them. Dr. Clack had actually conceived of this series in the summer of 2016 when he noticed this phrase and these words printed on bookmarks, banners, and billboards all across campus. He just called it sloganeering a second ago. He expressed a deep irritation about the offhand or slapdash use of words and wanted us to think more carefully about aimlessly throwing around our foundational principles and our foundational words, perhaps to the point where they mean nothing. So, as he just hinted when he talked about his original words on that day, February 6th, he explained to us that a full understanding of the phrase and these words would require a 3-semester analysis, and noted to us that a 1-semester analysis would promote the illusion that these concepts are straightforward and uncontroversial. He asked us to resist the urge to rush or to reduce these words to 280 characters. And he claimed that the only way to explore the diverse and competing thoughts and concepts here, all subject to critique, was to take our time and to disentangle each word through the lens of different disciplines, fields of inquiry, or approaches. So by not hurrying, we could tease out the meaning, value, and the promise behind our founding phrase. So how do I know all of this? It's because I didn't take notes back then, but I have gone onto the Humanities Center YouTube and revisited many of the presentations that we've had here, and I just revisited that one recently. So, with our mission here in this room, these Tuesday series outlined for us, we took off on this journey led by Dr. Clack with his syllabus, the flyers for these events, with a syllabus in hand and with the assistance of Lindy Villa. But to really understand the scope of this exercise, I collected some data about the Tuesday at 4 through 5:20 series. Did you know that we had 91 lectures here by faculty and campus experts or students? That's 3 per time, but 91 separate lectures. 18 disciplines were represented, as well as university ministry, the Women's Center, our students, the Alcala Review, Away with Words was here, the Changemaker Hub, the CCTC, the Dean, I've been here 3 times now, associate deans, and if you count up all the hours, this translates, where's Ron? This translates to 45 contact hours. So this means that anybody who was here for a majority of these events is now eligible for 3 units of credit. So in my remarks today, I'm going to deconstruct this extraordinary experience, or this class that we participated in every Tuesday at 4 through 5:20. Like all students, not all of us were able to attend each time, except perhaps, like Brian just mentioned, Phil and Larry, Lindy and Brian. I think I made many of them, so I think I'll get a B+, perhaps, if I'm lucky. So, here's, I'm going to leave this up while we talk for a bit. Here, the activities that occurred. Different types, students, faculty, Martha Barnett. So, here, the next few minutes, I'm going to do 3 things. First, I am going to review the conclusions we have come to with what I dare to call a 3-semester-long ontological exercise to understand the ideas of beauty, goodness, and truth. Second, I'm going to discuss the pedagogical method that Dr. Clack used to gently guide us toward a conclusion and a better understanding of this founding phrase and these words. I'm not even sure that Brian realizes how masterfully he has led us in one of the greatest forms of philosophical inquiry. The design, the sequencing, and the format of the series have been excellently executed. I'm not even sure that I realized the extent of this work or its success until I prepared these remarks and analyzed the entirety of the exercise and was given the responsibility of trying to tie it all together. So the third thing I'm going to do is I'm going to venture a guess about what he may lead us into next, given his hints about programming for the fall of 2019. So let's begin by talking about the nature of our 3-semester-long discussion. Is it a clear and clean discussion? Is it an ontological exercise? Or perhaps is it a hermeneutical exercise? Or perhaps it's just a deconstructive postmodern exercise. Do any of these terms apply at all or explain what we have done here together? If we have just completed an ontological analysis, then we have accepted that beauty, goodness, and truth are transcendental concepts that correspond to 3 fundamental aspects of human interest and are the ideals that transcend all other categories. These transcendentals are ontologically one and are convertible, in other words, where there is truth, there is beauty, and where there is beauty, there is truth, and so on. Just as Sister Rodee told us a moment ago. If this is an exercise of ontological formation, we have been involved in the study or exploration of the essence of being, the layers of being, the different formations of being. We have been sorting them out all together using more than 18 lenses to do the sorting. Both the Catholic Church and Lance, if I say this correctly, maybe I'll get an A-. The Samkhya, one of the 6 schools of Hindu, teach that ideals like beauty, goodness, and truth are indeed transcendent and are not contingent upon cultural diversity or ideology. They are at essence all that exists. Hence, some of us in the room may prefer to use another term to describe the form of inquiry we have engaged in here. Instead of studying the ontological formation, we have perhaps engaged in a hermeneutical analysis or a hermeneutical circle, where we can uncover the understanding of the whole through a simple understanding of the individual parts. But unlike an ontological exploration, hermeneutics assumes an open field of inquiry that isn't limited by a pre-established definition. And it does not suggest that the values we explore as a system are fixed ideals, and instead may convey a sense that these values or ideals can be relative or social constructs. This is the point where my head starts to spin. I say to myself, I am a political scientist. I didn't have to do this stuff. I'm not a philosopher, and I just need to sit back and enjoy myself. So I'll confess at this moment that after this series concluded last week with Truth Isn't Truth, Truth and Lies, Truth Isn't Truth, Truth and Lies in the Current Political Landscape with Doctors Dixon, Evans, and Moran, I was at that point ready to throw up my hands and say, well, that's it. It's all done. We have we're done. We have completed a full deconstruction of these words. Off we go, and we might as well go back to slapping them on bookmarks, billboards, and banners because they really aren't worth much. In fact, if I were to explain what struck me the most readily using my own disciplinary lens after the 90 lectures, this is where I rested before I had to tie this all together. On truth, I think I'd settle with Dean Emeritus Pat Drynen's description from Machiavelli. And I'm quoting Machiavelli, "For a long time we have not said what I believed, nor do I ever believe what I say, and if I indeed, I'm going to start that one again. For a long time I have not said what I believed, nor do I ever believe what I say. And if, indeed, I sometimes do happen to tell the truth, I hide it among so many lies that it's hard to find." You just sit there. On beauty, I'm satisfied with the last session on the critique of beauty, Lori Watson was there, where we discussed the dark underbelly of beauty that leaves something or someone out, and where racial or dominant cultural conceptions of beauty are hegemonic. On goodness, I have no argument with Dr. Clack's description of the wicked world we live in, which according to Schopenhauer, and apparently to Clack, is the worst of all possible worlds. And this last bit is from Pascal, where the earth is thrown over our heads and we are finished forever. Well, that would be if it was a bad day. If it was a good day, I might admit that I agree with Dr. Malachi Black that the idea of goodness can be found in poetry, because poetry is one of the few places where we can experience eternity. That's what he told us. But while I might alight on these understandings of beauty, goodness, and truth today, I also don't come to any conclusions or reconstruction of the full phrase. I don't come to a better understanding of their meaning or even their collective lack of meaning. At least I don't think so. Indeed, we're going to deconstruct this series once more here. Indeed, a review of the series videos that are up on YouTube for your viewing pleasure. And by the way, if you look on YouTube, you see that on some of them, you've got 50, 60 people who have viewed these. I don't know if you're going home and watching it again or what's going on, but they are being viewed. They similarly suggest that our understanding of these concepts are varied and untethered. Derek Cartwright from Art, Architecture, and Art History joined members of his department to state that there is a very complicated relationship between beauty and art. Derek noted, as he described this painting titled Dead Frog with Flies, that ugly and beautiful is an unfair binary and that it is a mistake to believe that artistic goodness is identical to beauty. There is more to art than the binary. And he quoted Arthur Danto, who says, the mistake is to believe that artistic goodness is identical with beauty, and that the perception of artistic goodness is the aesthetic perception of beauty. On the other hand, Diane Hoffus in mathematics showed us that math is gorgeous, whether an image of a Poincare dihedral space, this one down here, an image that shows what it would look like if we lived in a finite and positively curved world, or a Penrose tiling, this one up here, that is supposed to look like a pattern, but where the lines don't line up. There is no pattern there. Or she could just show us a pretty sleek formula, and she tells us that's beautiful as well. I see Dr. DeHaan is here. He tells us that even though Dr. Clack says that goodness is non-existence in our wicked world, David DeHaan in chemistry and biochemistry emphasizes that goodness of scientific inquiry, there is goodness in it, as long as it's problem solving and not monster creating. Then we turn to very dark views of truth. We had Dr. Greer in philosophy, who provided us with a delightful summary of Friedrich Nietzsche's conclusion that truth is dead with these words. Truth is an abstraction that is generated from socio-political intersubjective norms and thus has its basis not in some human reality, but in human languages. Truths are illusions which have become worn out and drained of their sensuous force. Or just go back to truth isn't truth. And then another one, this will be the last one I pull out, we had Julia Kanzler from sociology, who explained that truth is power, and that the conquerors rewrite all narratives to tell their stories, to create their myths, and to draw their own boundary lines, even in our own region, between Mexico, the Kumeyaay land between Mexico and California. So, where does this leave us? Have we participated in an ontological exercise or even a hermeneutical exercise after looking at all of this? Is this a deconstruction that has a reconstruction? It's here that I arrive at my second point. Through this 16-month exercise and my required concluding paper, here it is, Dr. Clack, you could grade it later. My required concluding paper and presentation, I'm certain we have uncovered the spirit of the whole through its separate parts. Whether on purpose or intuitively, Dr. Clack has forced us to think very deliberately about these words, and he has done so using a pedagogy inherent in a liberal arts educational tradition. Using a form of Socratic instruction where the learner deconstructs and then is left on her own to reconstruct, he has gently guided us toward a deeper understanding of the value of the words used by Mother Rosalie Clifton Hill. We have been given the gift of participating in a great form of human conversation that I believe only a liberal arts education gives rise to. Here we have investigated, critiqued, discussed, and delighted in transdisciplinary exploration and exchange of ideas about the most complex of human concepts. A philosopher I like quite a lot, Michael Oakeshott, philosopher of education, helps to emphasize these points about education with words about the beauty of exploring slowly and finding the space to disentangle ideas with conversation. I share these words with new faculty and new students at the beginning of each academic year, and I'll share them with you now. Exploration without a hurry helps to remove the crookedness of our thinking and leads us to a more economical use of concepts, an activity neither to be overrated or despised. And education is the invitation to disentangle oneself for a time from the urgencies of the here and now and to listen to the conversation in which human beings forever seek to understand themselves. So I hope you see that this means we have come full circle, because the ends of a good education and a robust, well thought out conversation are nourishment for our souls. Education and the process of human inquiry brings us closer to beauty, goodness, and truth just through the exploration and the conversation itself. I don't know if we call this an ontological exercise. I don't know if it's a hermeneutical exercise, a metastructural ontological dialogic, a hermeneutical meta-narrative, a hermeneutical meta-ontological structural formation. I am not a philosopher. So I started to ask people last week, what am I doing? What is it when you study a structure, the words, using another structure, the liberal arts, and then come back full circle? I spoke with political scientists and philosophers alike. I talked to Lori Watson, I talked to Mike Kelly, I talked to Tim McCarty. Yesterday morning, I even called Brian's sister, Beverly Clack. She's a philosopher who's been with us through one of these series, and she's in Oxford. And she rolled her eyes. We were on FaceTime, and she said, "My God, Noelle, just say what happened in there without all those silly words. You participated in a transdisciplinary analysis of a beautiful set of words." Well, there you go. I couldn't agree more. Mike Kelly and I still want to call it an ontological exercise. We either want to do that, or he sent this poem to me and I decided to share it with you because I think this nails it. By T.S. Eliot, part of the Four Quartets from the Little Gidding. We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time, through the unknown, unremembered gate, when the last of earth left to discover is that which was the beginning, at the source of the longest river, the voice of the hidden waterfall, and the children in the apple tree. That's just one phrase. It's important that I've made clear that Dr. Clack's part in this wasn't just assembling the speakers. He carefully considered how to structure this conversation. He helped to make it accessible by being inclusive, and he assured we were able to follow by organizing the discussion. So we started with fundamentals, moved to application, and then concluded with critiques. I know this wasn't easy, although I think he made it look easy. This kind of conversation is a good conversation. Elizabeth Minich, author of Evil of Banality, The Life and Death Importance of Thinking, says it is this kind of activity that will keep us from evil. Here, we have come together to practice paying attention, practice reflecting, practice thinking. This is the only antidote for the evil of banality and the hope for beauty, goodness, and truth. So in this room, we have spent a lot of time warding off that wicked world, or worst of all worlds, described by Schopenhauer. It is here with you in a liberal arts institution that I get to have conversations like these, to see beauty, to feel goodness, and to get closer to understanding what the truth may be. And I, for one, am very thankful for this. You're going to be super happy that I didn't conclude my third part. So my third part, I read this entire book. You can hold it up. Just to summarize what might be next. Action versus contemplation. I'm super excited that we have another system perhaps to analyze. I know that Brian is going to be bringing in sports analyses and lectures in the fall. I don't know if they're part of the Tuesday series, but I know he's starting to think about action. I like this book because it describes action as grammar, it describes it as punctuation, it describes it as writing, but as civic action and as science. So, Mike, I'm going to turn over the concept of action because action and contemplation are tied closely. And Sister Rodee, you ended with that as well. So, I'm done.
I don't have a PowerPoint, so I'm extremely grateful and honored and a bit terrified to be with you today. Dr. Clack, thank you for inviting me. To be honest, I feel extremely unqualified to be on this panel with Dean Norton and Sister Rodee. Not only do they have much more wisdom than I do on this topic, but they've been able to attend many more of these sessions than I have. So with that major qualifier, here we go. The title of my talk is The Challenge of Being True to Our Mission in an, quote, absurd universe. I'm grateful for Dean Norton to suggesting that I read the book Action versus Contemplation, which is where the phrase absurd universe comes from. And much of my talk is based from reflections from this book, as well as another book I read in August, that I'm going to pull out here, entitled Winners Take All. Basically, I'm going to provide my own reflections about our USD community and how we are living up to or not living up to our mission. But first, some framing and some setting of expectations. While the concepts in these books are my guideposts, much of what I have to say today is from my own personal experiences of trying to be true to USD's mission. I know many of you are in these trenches as well, and that your experiences may be different, and that you will disagree with some of my assumptions, my recommendations for action, and perhaps even some of my facts. But in the spirit of this semester's theme, I am in no way claiming to have the, quote, truth about these topics, but only that I have some opinions based on my time here at USD as a student, as an adjunct faculty member, as a postdoc, as a tenure track and tenured faculty member, and more recently as a director of the Hub. Despite the many years that I've spent at USD, it's really through my experiences the last 5 years at the Hub that I've been able to get a 30,000-foot view of the system of USD. And this reflection is an attempt for me to articulate the perspectives of those different parts of my experiences that are at any one moment in tune with student experience, the faculty experience, and dare I say, the administrator experience. Also, for those of you who do not know me, you should know that I am idealistic and naive to a fault. I have been told so to my face by my parents, by my colleagues, and even my kids. Despite being a political scientist and thus knowing better, I am always pushing the outer limits of what is possible in a community. I believe in team. I believe in all members of a team working together for a defined goal. As a Little League coach, one of my most effective strategies is to talk to my team at the beginning of the season about the bent nickel. I line up a stack of nickels on the ground and I show them how powerful those nickels are when they're all together. And then I pull out of my pocket the infamous bent nickel. And I put the bent nickel at the bottom and I stack the nickels and we see how the tower falls. And I give each kid a nickel and I say, don't be the bent nickel this season. Now, while this experience, it works perfectly well with 10 to 12-year-olds who all just really want the nickel at the end of my inspirational speech, I'm not sure whether this would work in a department meeting. I mean, isn't being the bent nickel the point of being a faculty member, at least one with tenure? Could the bent nickel just as easily be analogized to original thought or academic freedom? Aren't we trained in graduate school to be critical and contrarian? It may be the case that the tower of nickels that my Little League players and me so desperately want to construct is really at odds with the system of interest, incentives, and culture at USD and in higher education more broadly. This is something I hope to work out with you today. So why are we at USD and how do we relate to our mission? And what is our mission, by the way? For those of you that don't have it memorized, here's the one the Board of Trustees approved in 2004. Quote, "The University of San Diego is a Roman Catholic institution committed to advancing academic excellence, expanding liberal and professional knowledge, creating a diverse and inclusive community, and preparing leaders who are dedicated to ethical conduct and compassionate service." Our vision statement, approved by the Board of Trustees in 2016, is a bit more direct. It says, quote, "The University of San Diego sets the standard for an engaged, contemporary Catholic university where innovative changemakers confront humanity's urgent challenges." Now for me, I would combine the mission and the vision statement to read something like this. USD is an education institution that is committed to preparing its students to live a purposeful and meaningful life informed by the Catholic intellectual tradition where they have the knowledge, skills, and values to be active and engaged members of their communities. I want our students to not just be consumers of civic life, but to be co-producers of civic life. I believe that one of the most precious things that I've inherited by being born and living in the United States is something that is sometimes akin to a liberal democracy. I know that liberal democracies often fail and that we are in dangerous territory if we think that the US experience is an exception to this rule. I also believe that our experience with liberal democracy is quite recent. I agree with scholars who would claim that our liberal democracy was established in 1965, not 1789, and that therefore we are really quite young and still working out the kinks of this experiment. As we teach those who will be or who are the elite, we have an obligation, I believe, to prepare them not just for a purposeful life and a rewarding career, but to prepare them to be virtuous and to consider the common good. This sentiment, a belief in the common good and working towards it, I believe is part of the mission. As central as a liberal and professional knowledge is to the purpose of higher education, and USD specifically, we claim we want something more than the accumulation of knowledge by faculty and the transfer of the knowledge to students and our colleagues. We want to create a, quote, diverse and inclusive community. We claim to prepare leaders for service and to confront humanity's urgent challenges. This is a tall order. And unless they are acted upon, they are not that meaningful or important as words. To relate it back to political science, our mission and vision statements are our preamble, flowery, ambitious, and more to the point, oftentimes contradictory to the lived experiences of those of us who reside in the community. But like I said, I'm idealistic and naive. And when asked why I choose a career in education and why I chose to work at USD, it is because of these lofty ideas and the potential of creating a community as close to this ideal as possible. This is my take on the mission of USD. It is liberal knowledge plus more, or as the authors of Action and Contemplation frame it, it is the belief in combining contemplation and action. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. First, bear with me. Let's think about the unique community that we are a part of, where we seek to live this mission. I believe that the unique community of campus life within higher education, whether at USD or another institution, actually makes it very difficult for us to stay true to our mission. According to Aristotle, Tim, correct me on this, the size of USD makes it just about right to have an engaged community, about 10,000 people. Based on the statistics I found from the IRP website, and this is where you might disagree with my information. I apologize. Where's Tom Harrington? Is he here? Good. So, all right. As of fall 2018, Ron will know too. As of fall 2018, our community consisted of 9,073 students, 998 faculty, and at least a dozen staff and administrators. I couldn't get that number. Our student body is approximately 49% white, 38% minority, and 8.5% international. According to the Equality of Opportunity Project, which you can find at the New York Times, 66% of our students come from the top 20% income bracket. 13% of our students come from families in the top 1% bracket, and 3.2% of our students come from the bottom 20% bracket. While the Equality and Opportunity Project does not report data from 1990, my second year at USD as a student, we do have data from IRP on the composition of white and non-white students at that time. And in 1990, our fall enrollment was 15% minority, while in 2007, it was 25%. And as I mentioned, today, it is 38%. So just in terms of fall enrollment numbers, our campus has changed quite a bit over the last 30 years. Today, we have 998 faculty. This is all faculty, tenured, non-tenured. Of this group, 24% are minority and 49% are male. In 2001, the latest data I could find on the website, there were 651 faculty, of which 17% were minority and almost 56% were male. Again, these statistics reveal that the composition of faculty and students on this campus is changing. The point of sharing these raw numbers is simply to point out what many of us already know and to highlight one of the most important features of our campus community. Our campus is more diverse than it once was, but for many of us, it is not diverse enough. And more importantly, as the composition of the campus changes, so do the expectation on what it means to live our mission. There are other ways in which living out our mission in a campus community is difficult. One is that our community is constantly changing as students enter and leave. As we all know, many of the initiatives and programs that we do with students outside of the classroom ebb and flow with who is around. Thus, consistency of community and thus accountability from students is difficult to maintain. Next, faculty, staff, and administrators can more often than not outlast the students. While faculty like to see themselves as part of the oppressed class, we are really the ones with the power in this place, especially those of us who with tenure or who are tenure track. We can also outlast the administrators most of the time. And while we may not be able to outlast all the staff, our ability to invoke our privilege and get our way means that they really are no match for us. So I guess what I'm saying is that to the extent to which we live our mission is really about our own commitment to it. And by our, I mean the faculty in the room. In many ways, the buck stops with us. At the same time, while the energy that students bring to campus will ebb and flow, we should more creatively collaborate with them in ways that can sustain the mission. My experience is that they are eager, sometimes too eager, to work with faculty to make USD a more inclusive, engaged, and vibrant campus community. But also, we can just ignore our obligation to the mission. We can, if we choose, hold up the banners. Hold up the banner of liberal arts, of change-making, transdisciplinary, integration, social justice, the 3 Ps, the 4 bottom lines, and just simply do nothing. We can simply outlast those who might care. But is this the type of community that represents the principles of beauty, goodness, and truth? To make matters even more challenging, we live in a broader socio-political economic world that seems to favor less community and more individualism and transactional relationships over ones based on trust and reciprocity. So from my vantage point at the Hub, I've also seen another challenge the last 5 years, and it seems to me that it's only going to get more intense, and that is reflected in the statistics I just shared. As the campus changes in terms of our diversity, both with faculty and students, the challenges of creating an inclusive community become more difficult. Many of us have not been trained to deal with the challenges that are arising inside and outside of the classroom that relate to these issues. And in particular, over the last few years or so, the universe has become even more absurd. Rather than higher education being separate from and fenced off from the so-called real world, we are very much a part of it. How we choose to deal with these issues may be the most important and defining feature of the next few years. Many of the debates, discussions, and confrontations on our campus the last 10 years, and especially the last 5, have focused on issues of diversity, inclusion, and equity, and I expect that this will be the rule moving forward. So given the unique challenges that we face as a campus community, as well as our commitment to the mission and values mentioned earlier, what is to be done? How might we as a university promote these values that we claim to be the foundation of our community? To be honest, I'm not really sure, but I have some ideas. And remember, I'm an idealist who carries a bent nickel with his pocket, so bear with me. First, we need a culture shift away from an us versus them mentality. When I first came to USD as an adjunct and then tenure track professor, I remember being told by colleagues in my department that we were the best department on the campus. We had the best teachers. We cared the most. And all students should be political science and international relations majors. But if students should choose not to be in the greatest department, they should at least choose one in the college over the other schools. In graduate programs, the professional school stuff, don't even get me started on that. Until serving on the ARRT committee and then being chair, and finally working with the Hub, I had no experience to counterbalance this siloed approach to our university. And of course, this is all about power. As Summit and Vermeil are the authors of this, so just I'll keep referring, note in their book, humanities became, quote, an institutional entity only in the first half of the 20th century, when those fields were consolidated as a single division to counterbalance the growing institutional presence of the natural and social sciences. They go on. What is the university's mission, they ask? Quote, it is not how to define and rank the relative prestige of the disciplines and their practitioners, but how to best bring the branches of learning together in order to inspire students to produce a more integrated understanding themselves of their world, unquote. While their argument focuses on the divisions between humanities and the other disciplines, we could just as easily apply their logic to the relationship between the schools as well. Who loses power? Who loses in this power game between the disciplines and schools? Of course, the students. My own experience in the classroom and advising students is that they could care less about our own internal divisions than they do with trying to navigate how to negotiate what they should study and what their parents tell them to study. As I will explain in a moment, the more we offer them exciting and meaningful transdisciplinary experiences and courses, the more likely they will be to practice and live the mission that we claim is so important to us. Second, we should recognize the danger of what Gary Ardis refers to as win-winism. In his book, Winners Take All, Gary Ardis argues that the field of social change has been taken over by the very elites that benefit from the current socio-political and economic system. For those of you who have always associated changemaking as the Trojan horse for promoting a liberal capitalist order that benefits the status quo, this is your book. I read it in August and it scared the hell out of me. He calls out many of the labels and slogans that I had become familiar with, such as, quote, doing well by doing good, or the rise of the so-called thought leader. Quite simply, he frames his argument around this idea, quote, social change is not a project that one group of people carries out for the benefit of another, unquote. He notes the philosophy of win-win. The belief that there are beneficial side effects of self-interest is antithetical to real social change and to social justice. Rather, social justice is about win-lose. It is about the redistribution of resources. It is about shifting of power. He says that, quote, suffering cannot be innovated away, unquote, and that we must focus on the root causes and make difficult decisions. I wanted to bring up this point just because this book has been on my mind since August, and I've been dying to sort of just get it out, that this was in my head. But the more I thought about it for this talk, the more I was thinking it's a warning for us as well. And by us, I mean those of us with power at USD. He quotes Upton Sinclair, and he notes that, quote, the elites will fight as though they are insurgents while they operate as though they are kings. He also notes that, quote, it is difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on not understanding it, unquote. We should, it seems to me, focus our attention on those on campus, faculty, students, and staff who are the most vulnerable. And more importantly, we should provide them with space to have the agency to promote the type of social change that will result in winners and losers. Everyone should have some skin in the game, and we should be willing to acknowledge our own privilege as we think about the campus community we aspire to be. We should not make changes for students, but we should make changes with them. What I most often hear from faculty is that they would do more to promote and support the mission, but they would have to do this in addition to their current workload. In other words, more responsibilities are added, but nothing is sacrificed. Something has to give. Resources have to be